In this lecture, I want to introduce the concept of a key moment. As I talked about at the very beginning of the course, life is hard. Although it offers beauty, wonder, and joy, we don't need to look very far to find adversity in the form of traumatic events or everyday hassles. The good news is that these events are our greatest opportunities for growth. It's in our challenges that we get to do the heavy lifting that builds our emotional muscle and which shapes our character and even makes our lives meaningful. Well, I call these challenges key moments. They're realities or circumstances and events which present a challenge and demand a response. Some key moments are rather mild, like a child spilling a glass of milk or traffic on the way to work, but others shake us to the very core. Losing a job, the death of a loved one. None of us is immune to key moments. And some people in life have it far worse than others, whether it be due to difficult circumstances from their background, whether it's their biology and heritage or their own choice making. But it doesn't matter who you are, you still have your share of challenges. They come to all of us. They happen, in fact, daily, several times a day. But even more importantly, I'm here to tell you that how we handle our key moments determines the quality of our lives and relationships. When we respond poorly to our key moments, we put ourselves on a downward spiral in which we live from a scarcity mindset and can end up feeling like pawns or victims of life. On the other hand, as we learn to respond positively to our key moments, we put ourselves on an upward trajectory in which we become more emotionally mature, confident, and capable people. So let me give you some other examples, a bunch of examples of key moments. You'll notice that some of these are rather minor and some are big. A child knocks over a glass of milk at breakfast, or your children are constantly bickering. Your flight home on a Friday evening has been canceled. You've been rejected and left by your spouse or a lover. A teenager is rebelling and maybe doing illegal drugs. Someone criticizes you for a presentation that you delivered in a recent meeting. A coworker fails to show up for the third time this month, meaning that you have to take on some of their workload. You've been waiting for 25 minutes for a friend who's late. You're in a dead-end job but see no options. A close family member has died. So sometimes key moments don't seem to have a real distinct triggering event. We notice that we're in a negative emotional mood, resentment, fear, guilt, sadness, but we can't pin it on any one thing. It is likely that we're reacting to an accumulation of key moments and also that we're unaware of our thought process about these events. Because we're not aware of the source doesn't make them any less real. So as I said in the last lecture, there's a cause-effect relationship between the various elements of the empowerment model. And by that I mean that results are driven by behavior. Behavior is determined by our feelings. Our feelings flow from our thoughts, and our thoughts are triggered by an event or situation. Well, learning to handle our key moments means that we take time to understand what is happening during an event so that we can pause and choose how to respond instead of just react. Let's take a look at an example to understand what I'm talking about. So for some time, Lisa has been studying an initiative which she believed would make a major improvement in the success of her organization. In fact, she decided to do a formal presentation in an upcoming staff meeting to gain a commitment to pursue this idea. After doing her homework, she went to the meeting feeling really prepared and energetic. However, throughout her presentation, her boss looked down, scribbled on a notepad, and made no comments. The response of her boss was disturbing and confusing to Lisa. She felt not only hurt but deflated by her boss's behavior. After the meeting, Lisa retreated to her workplace and spent much of the remainder of the day in unproductive stewing about what she could have done better and why she couldn't get the recognition she deserved for her efforts. Later, she found a sympathetic coworker with whom she could criticize her boss for his weaknesses. Although nothing was said, Lisa continued to harbor resentment and had a more difficult time relating to her boss following this incident. Well, this event, I should say, represents a key moment for Lisa. And how Lisa responds to her key moment is significant to her ongoing relationship with her boss, as well as her effectiveness on the job. What determines how she's likely to respond? Let's fill in the boxes to understand Lisa's response. The triggering event is Lisa's boss's behavior during her presentation. He looked down, scribbled on a notepad, made no comments. It's so easy to assume that our emotions are caused by events since they occur so spontaneously following them. In reality, however, it's not the event, but rather our thinking or the meaning that we give the event that determines how we feel and ultimately the choices that we make. Lisa felt anxious, hurt, and sorry for herself during and following the presentation. But this wasn't caused by her boss's behavior, as I said, but rather by the meaning she gave his behavior. So the event occurs, her boss is silent. She attributes a meaning to it, and the meaning she attributes is, he doesn't like what I have to say, and what she feels is hurt. So I said in my lecture on reality, reality is neutral. Events are just events. They have no inherent meaning. We give them meaning. It's in the way we interpret them, and we interpret them through a filter of our beliefs. In fact, every person observing the same event may arrive at a very different conclusion. Imagine two people standing on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The way I experience that is very different than the way my wife experiences it. I might conclude that, wow, it's exciting, even inspirational, whereas she feels like it's really frightening and overwhelming. Although the event is the same, the meanings are very different. One person may conclude that the anger that's expressed by a coworker means that the coworker doesn't like her. Another concludes that the former has had a difficult day and so is feeling threatened and insecure. Again, the event is the same, the meanings are different. There are generally themes and patterns to the meaning that we give events, which can be traced back to core beliefs which we formed during childhood or in earlier life experiences. For example, if I felt a lot of rejection as a child, then chances are pretty good that I formed some core beliefs about how much people like me, or how much I could trust people to be interested in my feelings and my needs and wants. That becomes a filter that'll influence the meaning that I attribute to events today. If I was in a relationship with somebody who didn't keep their promises, then it's also easy for me to form the belief, albeit unconscious, that people are insincere and can't be trusted. That belief will likewise surface and influence the meaning that I attribute to events today. By examining and challenging the meaning that we give events and circumstances, we empower ourselves to feel and respond differently to our triggering events. This isn't always easy to do. We unconsciously equate the meaning we give events with the truth. We assume that the way we see things is the way they are. As a matter of fact, the mind functions to be right about whatever it happens to believe. For example, a student believes he is stupid. A young girl thinks she's ugly and that no guy would ever want to go out with her. A bulimic woman may be very thin and yet remains convinced she's fat. An employee believes you can't trust management. A manager believes that employees really don't care, and on and on. We gather evidence to prove ourselves right about these beliefs and refuse even to see disconfirming evidence. These kind of thoughts and beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies in our world, in our lives. We see the world not as it is, but in a way that reinforces what we already believe. And so we become trapped, not so much by the events and circumstances of life, but rather by our thoughts or the meaning and beliefs that we give those events. So Lisa told herself a number of things about her boss's behavior. She told herself that her boss didn't like what she was saying. She told herself that he lacked confidence in her, that he wished that he had hired Joan. Well, it's pretty easy to see how these thoughts would lead to Lisa's feelings. The physical sensations of tight muscles in her neck and shallow breathing and sweaty palms, and also the emotions of anxiety, hurt, self-pity, and depression. Our negative feelings following a triggering event are not bad or wrong. In fact, they're a cue that something is out of balance and needs a response. We can use our feelings to pay attention to what's happening and thereby come up with a more thoughtful rather than simply a knee-jerk response. However, if unaware, if unable to thoughtfully examine and understand our negative feelings, then we act them out in destructive ways. They influence our physical health, or may lead to self-destructive behaviors like poor job performance or addictions or estrangement from family and friends. Let's look at Lisa's behavior that follows from her feelings of hurt and self-pity. She may have withdrawn to her workplace and spent much of the remainder of the day in unproductive stewing about what she could have done better or why she couldn't seem to get the recognition she deserved. Late in the day, she may have found a sympathetic coworker and gone to that coworker and criticized her boss. Her behavior makes her feel better temporarily, but it also weakens her confidence and also her capability for dealing with concerns in a direct and honest manner. And what are the results? If Lisa withdraws from her boss and harbors resentment, she's going to have a more difficult time communicating or relating to him in a positive way in the future. Unconsciously, she communicates her hurt, her resentment, maybe through silence, through sarcasm, which her boss senses, causing him to treat her in a less favorable way. When we withdraw from others, we shut ourselves off from the very acceptance or respect we desire. If we yell at our children, for example, to force their compliance, we alienate them and lose the influence we so desperately seek. If we ignore our need for communication, our relationship becomes all the more superficial. The solution becomes the problem, and the consequences of our actions set up new triggering events. Ironically, the same events that we wanted to avoid in the first place. We create the very conditions in our lives that we complain about and blame on others. Well, now let's assume for a moment that Lisa had come up with a different set of thoughts about her boss's behavior during her presentation. Suppose, for example, she had thought, my boss is really distracted by something big going on. Or my boss already understands and agrees with what I'm sharing. Or I'm really not sure what my boss is thinking and I need to check it out. Her feelings would have been very different. She may have felt confidence and optimism about her message and her presentation. Instead of retreating to her office to lick her wounds, she'd have gotten back to work, being productive and interacting with others in more positive ways. The results would have been a friendly work environment and an attitude of goodwill towards her boss, which would have set up a positive cycle of interaction. Well, let's assume, however, that after further exploration, Lisa discovers that indeed her boss did not like or agree with the tenets of her presentation. Well, the meaning that she could give that fact may be, oh no, I've really blown it. I've lost all credibility with my boss. On the other hand, she could think, I didn't do as much homework as I could have, or I need to better document my point of view before continuing to talk about this subject. Or I need to do a better job of educating my boss about my point of view. She could have approached her boss and checked out her assumptions by sharing her perceptions and asking him for his thoughts regarding her presentation. He may have responded by saying he fully agreed, but he was distracted by another matter that had just come to his attention. She would have then realized that she had misinterpreted his behavior as disapproval when it was not intended as such. On the other hand, he may have shared some concerns about her presentation. Lisa could recognize this as an opportunity to use his point of view as information to further clarify her own thinking or engage in further dialogue about the differences in their points of view. In either case, she would be strengthened by the exchange because she acted from personal integrity and was willing to use this experience to learn and grow. It's critical to see that the meaning we give an event is not the truth, but it's a point of view which originates inside of our own minds from our own core beliefs. By being aware of the beliefs through which we interpret events, we empower ourselves to take responsibility for our reactions and behavior. We challenge and change our interpretations and judgments in ways that empower us to deal with life more effectively. So I hope you're beginning to understand the empowerment model and the cause and effect relationship between our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior, and our results. I want to explore more examples of this in my next lecture. I'll see you there.